Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1986 science fiction horror sequel and a classic in its own right, Aliens. This time, it's war. Now, Aliens is just like the first film, one of my personal favorites, and it's one of those rare sequels that is actually on par with its predecessor. And in large part, it's because of James Cameron. Because James Cameron not only directed this movie, but he's responsible for the first treatment of the sequel. He also wrote the film. And in a lot of ways, Aliens exists because of James Cameron and his faith in the concept. Because surprisingly enough, the studio didn't have the same faith in it. But James Cameron was a huge fan of Alien. He felt that there was a really good opportunity to do another one and to have a follow-up. And because he was a fan of the first film, he had a lot of passion when it comes to writing this sequel. And that really does come through in a multitude of different ways when it comes to the ultimate production and the ultimate final result of Aliens. And it starts with Cameron's direction. Cameron, at this point in time in his career, he was more known as kind of a maverick filmmaker. He was a guy who had a bit of a rep, but nothing was really solidified yet. He had directed The Terminator, and in the United States, at least, it was a hit, but overseas, it wasn't. Surprisingly enough, The Terminator actually bombed in the UK. It's something that isn't really discussed that much. The Terminator is just considered, for the most part, to be this huge hit, and one of the more successful independent films of the 80s, but it really wasn't necessarily as successful in other parts of the country. So Cameron hadn't really solidified his status as this legendary, iconic filmmaker or one of the best in the business at this point yet. He was still a guy trying to make a name for himself. And what a better way to make a name for yourself than doing a follow up to one of the more critically acclaimed sci fi horror films of that particular time period in Alien. Cameron even pitched the sequel to the studio. And his whole idea is like, okay, here's the title Alien, and then put an S next to it. And it's simple, but it is something that actually works very well when it comes to a title for the film. But he didn't just go there. I mean, he also put a lot of work into the treatment and the script and everything. And also his direction. I definitely feel this features some of Cameron's best work as a director. So what you get is a motivated Cameron. You get a James Cameron who's motivated, who's hungry, and as a result, you just get some absolutely fantastic and just terrific direction in this film. The action sequences, when you do get them, they are thrilling and top of the line, top notch stuff. The scenes that are intended to be more suspenseful and intense, like the face hugger sequence, and the face hugger is loose in the lab, or the first time the colonial marines encounter the nest and a good chunk of them gets killed off, and of course the confrontation with the alien queen. These are all sequences that are shot in ways that are just absolutely excellent and amazing, and at times genuinely awe-inspiring. Cameron had a knack for shooting practical effects at this point in time and really making them pop and making them look like the real thing. And the Alien Queen sequences to this day are still some of the best and most impressive looking scenes of practical effects in all of cinema. And there's just so much to like and love about Cameron's direction in Aliens when it comes to his framing, when it comes to his shot selection, when it comes to the different techniques that he's employing or wielding in front of the camera or behind it. Uh, yeah, if you look up some recollections from some of the cast and crew members, seemed like he was kind of a diva, kind of a dick to work with, even at this point in time. But you can't deny the man's talent. And he was willing to put up with a lot of shit. You have to look at the context of things when it comes to Cameron's involvement with aliens. The film basically exists because of Cameron, and it's as good as it is because Cameron wanted to give it more than just the average or more than just the bare minimum when it comes to his approach to the film. And he dealt with a lot of people on the set that didn't want to listen to him, didn't respect him, called him names, essentially bullied him, and he still was able to not only put up with all of that, but also take his own shots and ultimately get what he wanted when it comes to the film visually. He wanted the film to have this ethereal really eerie alien look to it. So that's why the movie has a lot of blues and has a lot of these different blue hues throughout it to really emphasize this very ethereal and just eerie and alien appearance and look to the overall film. He's the one that was fighting for a lot of the shots in the film to be a little bit more atmospheric, more moody, and not so clinical when it comes to the way that they're lit or the way that they're set up. He's the reason why Stan Winston was involved with the effects, as well as Stan Winston's crew with Al Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. And there's a lot of things that Cameron fought for, which is on display in this film and this overall production. Sigourney Weaver is only back as Ripley because of Cameron's insistence. Like Cameron was willing to completely walk off the project entirely if Weaver didn't get hired because he felt like Weaver's role in this as Ripley was so important. And it really is because her whole story, her whole arc of her overcoming her fears, and by the end of it, uh, getting a family and salvaging her own life, as well as genuinely providing herself a reason to continue to live and a reason to hope for the future. It's a lot of things that if it was a different character, none of that would really resonate as strongly, and that really comes down to Cameron. He's a technical wizard. He's just an unbelievably skilled filmmaker, and it's all on display here when it comes to Aliens. And there's a lot of stuff like he worked around the limitations of the budget. There's a lot of miniature work, did a good job in terms of incorporating those scenes with the scenes that were shot on set and shot without miniatures. There's a lot of stuff involving a very small amount of aliens, but the way that he was shot these scenes, it made it seem like there was more aliens than there actually were. And there's just a lot of stuff that Cameron brought to this production that is just genuinely special. Yeah, the screenplay by James Cameron, it's every bit as great as the direction is. The idea of having a sequel to Alien and having it take place 50 plus years in the future with Ripley awakening from cryosleep in a completely unknown and alien world is brilliant. It's a great idea and it's executed masterfully when it comes to this screenplay. Whether you watch the theatrical version or the extended cut, the fact that you have Wayland Yutani not believing Ripley and thinking that she's full of it when she's explaining her story, and and You have the line, "Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?" Because nobody wants to buy her story of these aliens, at least not the people in the boardroom. There are other people higher up that know all about these xenomorphs and want them for their bioweapons division. And there's something more sinister going on with this company and the reason behind the colonists at LV-426. And I just love that the planet from Alien that Kane and the crew landed on to investigate a distress signal is the same planet that Hadley's Hope is placed on. That LV-426, the colony, is on that same planet. And it's a nice way to have a callback and a connection to the first movie, but still feel somewhat fresh and new because of the addition of the colonists. It also helps add some new stakes because now Ripley, who at this point in time is starting to acclimate herself to this new environment, this new alien future of hers, and working as a power loader mover, somebody who uses a power loader and just moves stuff around like in a warehouse, but instead of using a forklift, she's using a power loader. And so she's acclimated herself to that lifestyle, but she's still having all these nightmares of the chest burster and the traumatic experience that she dealt with on the Nostromo, and she's not fully faced it yet, but she's just trying to move on from it and doesn't really have the motivation to go back to that planet until Burke explains about the colonists and tells her, the colonists are no longer communicating with the company. They've been cut off. And now Ripley, due to the confirmation from Burke and the company that they're going to go there with these Marines and kill the aliens and take them out, wipe them out for good. Now Ripley is willing to face her fears. And I just love that whole arc for Ripley. It makes perfect sense that she would have PTSD, that she would have this trauma because of what she experienced and the hell that she was put through in the first movie. And it's really well emphasized in the nightmare scene early on in the movie. And it's just a great way to get Ripley involved again and back in the game and have her go in and go back to this planet and face her fears head on. And she does it with this ragtag group of colonial marines. And the idea of the colonial marines being brought into the franchise is also really fun and novel in its own right. Uh, and it just leads to just so many memorable lines of dialogue and exchanges between the Marines, like with Vasquez and Hudson. They're like, "Hey, Vasquez, have you ever been mistaken for a man?" And then Vasquez is all like, "No, have you?" Just stuff like that. It's just so cool, and it just establishes these Marines as characters that you really root for and you really like. Hudson, with the wrong approach in the script, could come across as an unlikable jackass, but the way that he's written and the way that Bill Paxton in particular plays the character, he becomes a crowd pleaser. He becomes like a guy that you love and you want him to survive at the end. Despite the fact that there's elements of this character that, if they were done the wrong way, could have been absolutely insufferable. And there's a lot of that when it comes to the varying different personalities and little quirks and little quips that these Marines have when it comes to their exchanges with one another or their interactions with Ripley. And there's just a lot of great uh, um, moments between these characters that really is something that makes Aliens not just a film that's effective when it comes to the moments of tension and suspense and thrills, but also a film that's equally as effective when it comes to just being entertaining and fun to watch because of all these characters and their dynamic with one another and the dialogue in particular. And it does a great job at setting up these Marines as a group of people and a group of badasses that you think are going to take care of these xenomorphs. They're going to land on that planet, they're going to kick some ass. And then when they get taken out by the aliens, it makes the aliens and the xenomorphs an even more formidable threat because even these badass space marines can't take them out. And they've had a long history of dealing with other types of alien species and smashing bugs. So if they can't take them out, then man, these xenomorphs are some pretty bad motherfuckers in their own right. And then you have all of that, and then you throw in Newt, which is another really great idea and overall concept when it comes to the story and the script. To throw in this innocent girl who's a survivor herself, so there's some parallels with Newt and Ripley, and you make her into a character that isn't your typical damsel in distress kind of character. She ultimately does kind of become that later on in the movie, but prior to all of that, it's established that she survived. She found a way to scavenge and hide in these nooks and crannies and survive the initial onslaught on Hadley's Hope. And it leads to, that great line where Ripley, while Hudson is doing his whole thing, ranting and raving, and Ripley's all like, "This little girl survived." And then of course Hudson's like, well, why don't you put her in charge? So there's just a lot of great notes, a lot of great elements throughout this script, and one of them is definitely Newt. Like the few lines of dialogue you get from her, they mostly come out at night, mostly. Or, even her little subtle quirks herself that just make that character more endearing and have her own unique kind of personality, like the little salute that she gives in one scene and the thumbs up. It's just I just love the way that Newt is written as a character. And the dynamic between her and Ripley is really sweet. And you genuinely do start to feel a real connection and bond between the two, between Ripley and Newt. And when Newt calls Ripley, mama, her mother, like it's actually something that really resonates rather strongly. And when Ripley gets in that power loader and beats the ever loving crap out of the alien queen and says, "Get away from her, you bitch." Like it's a line that really packs a serious punch because of how well the dynamic between Newt and Ripley was established prior to that moment. It just shows the amount of care that Cameron put into the dynamic between these two characters. It's also the reason why the scene when Ripley goes to the nest and is just unloading on the eggs and the alien queen with the pulse rifle and the grenades and the flamethrower and shooting aliens right and left and blowing shit up. That's all so much more powerful and so much more impactful because of how Newt and Ripley were established as characters and how the bond between the two had become so strong up until that point. So when Ripley is willing to risk everything to save her and go down and literally go into hell to rescue her, it's something that just really packs an immense punch that it would not otherwise if it wasn't written as well when it comes to that dynamic between those two characters. And you also have, the typical sort of villain sort of character who's got ulterior motives. Instead of it being an android in Ash, it's Burke, but it still works well. Like the way that Burke is written, like the guy is a total prick. And like when he gets it, it's definitely quite a crowd pleasing moment. And I also love Bishop. I cannot mention this script without talking about Bishop because I love the fact that it takes the android and makes it into a good guy. Where the android was a bad guy in Alien, now the android in Aliens is the opposite. He's a good guy. He's willing to take all these risks himself to try to uh, uh, get Ripley and Newt and Hicks off this planet before the nuclear reactor explodes. Which that's another thing I love about the movie is that it establishes an extra layer of stakes on top of everything. It's not just one of those things, okay, they just need to survive the aliens. They have to get off that planet before it blows. Yeah, Bishop, there's just so many great moments of this character, moments between him and Ripley. I like the fact that Ripley is understandably very cold and very just standoffish with Bishop initially. But then as the film goes on, they actually become friends. And I just really like that dynamic as well. There's just so many things about this script that I love, and a lot of it has to do with the dynamic between the characters, the dynamic between Ripley and Hicks. I love that too, especially the moment when Hicks is teaching Ripley how to use the pulse rifle. Even the moments where Ripley and Hudson have their back and forth, I also like. Even the way that some of the Colonial Marines bite the big one when they get taken out by the aliens. Even that is really well written. I love the Hudson death scene. Like Hudson, you want him to live, but man, does he go out fighting? Get some, fuck you. He just has this just great, just absolutely badass moment where he's going out in a literal blaze of glory. I like the stuff with Vasquez and Gorman and that bit when they're in the air ducts and they're cornered and they both pull the pin on the grenade and you know blow each other up and the aliens at the same time. And I love the ending of the movie. I love everything about the ending of the movie, the climax. Newt getting left behind, and then Ripley going back and going to the nest and blowing shit up and kicking ass, taping the two guns together and, going in there and just absolutely wrecking shit. And then going and facing off with the queen and getting in the power loader and getting into a hand-to-hand mano a mano slugfest of the queen and then falling into the airlock and opening the airlock and sending the queen into space and the ending shot of it, which is such a great way to make things come full circle because in the end of Alien, the end shot is Ripley in hypersleep in her pod, sleeping peacefully. Well, at the end of Aliens, it's Ripley back in her pod sleeping peacefully, but now she's got a family. She's got friends that are survivors along with her, Newt and Hicks. I just love that Ripley, after she went through hell a second time, got her slice and her piece of heaven. I gotta hand it to James Cameron. I really do. And the whole concept of the Alien Queen was really cool and really unique. And I don't know what Ridley Scott's issue is with it. As great as the direction is and as good as the script is, like none of that can really be as effective without the right cast. And Aliens definitely has the right cast and then some. Sigourney Weaver coming back as Ripley, delivering, in my opinion, a performance that in a lot of ways is even better than her performance in the first film, and that's saying a lot because that was a very strong performance. But this is at a point in time when she's already gotten a lot more experience as an actress. So she's got a little more tricks of the trade to implement here. And on top of that, it's just one of the most iconic strong female character performances in all of cinema, if you ask me. Just the different layers and nuances of her character, the disillusionment of Ripley early on, her being just completely fraught and just wrecked by PTSD, and then going from that to facing her fears head on in one of the most iconic badass scenes in any film and in all of film. And following that up with another iconic badass scene where she's punching the queen in the face with the power loader after she says one of the most iconic one-liners of the entire decade. Just the way that she holds her own with this entire cast of very high energy kind of performers and very charismatic actors and actresses in their own right, and just holds everything together, is just so superb, and she deserved the Oscar nomination and then some. The scenes with her and Newt are definitely some of her best work as an actress. Like just the little small scenes between the two because of just how genuine it came across as and how real it felt. Michael Biehn was also great as Hicks. He pulled off the badass stuff, like he did in the Terminator. I keep this for Close Encounters. Eat this, yeah, and also did a good job when it comes to some of the other moments later on in the movie where it really feels like they're not gonna make it, and he's able to show that on his face and able to show that when it comes to his mannerisms and can show that change and shift and confidence uh, without really necessarily saying anything. And the fact that Bean was brought on last minute as a replacement for James Remar because Remar was a drug addict, uh, that makes his performance even more stand out and noteworthy because of the fact that yeah, he was brought in as a last minute replacement and he just had to fit in with the rest of the cast and fit in seamlessly. And then of course you have Lance Henriksen as Bishop, who had a bit role in the Terminator previously. He's in this in large part because of Cameron's involvement with the movie. And Lance said that if this didn't work out or his role wasn't good enough or the film didn't do well, he would have quit acting. Which that would have been a damn shame if Lance Henriksen quit acting because he's one of the more underrated and one of the most talented character actors of his generation, if you ask me. And he would just go on to do even more great work after Aliens. And his role in Bishop is just one of many great roles of his that are just very unique and interesting and captivating to watch. Um, Carrie Henn, I felt for a young actress, she did a really good job playing Newt, a character that for a good chunk of the film doesn't really say that much. A lot of her character had to be really showcased through just her making subtle movements, giving a thumbs up, giving a salute, and she was able to really bring a lot of charisma and charm into those little movements and just the way that she carried herself in the movie. And of course, you got Bill Paxton as Hudson, who is every bit as memorable and as iconic as some of the other characters in the cast. Definitely has some of the most memorable lines of dialogue, and a lot of it was improvised by Bill. So he made this role his own in a multitude of different ways. Game over, man! Game over! Like, that was all improvised by Bill Paxton. That was not in the script. So, a lot of what makes Hudson such an iconic, memorable character is due to Bill Paxton and what he brought to the character. And it wouldn't be there if Bill wasn't the one playing the role. Um, William Hope is also really good in his own right as Gorman, the inexperienced commanding officer. I think William Hope is one of the more underrated performances in the film because the guy just does such a great job playing this commander who is just scared shitless and doesn't know what to do. Like the guy doesn't have the experience, and the actor isn't afraid to show all of that on camera. The guy's sweaty nervousness, the guy's lack of confidence in a situation, especially when it comes to the aliens and when the attack happens, and just the contrast between him and the badass colonial marines was really fun to me personally. It definitely made the Marines stand out even more, and it made him stand out too, and both in a good way. Rico Ross is Frost, Al Matthews is Apone. Both of them are really good, really solid. Did some really good work. Um, the rest of the Colonial Marines, Vasquez, Jenette Goldstein, she was a badass. She was a smart mouth, but she was genuinely likable and believable when it comes to the combat sequences with the aliens and when she's got the shoulder gun. And there's a reason why that character is a fan favorite. And a lot of it is what's on the script, but a lot of it is also what Jenette Goldstein brought to the character. Initially, she wasn't even the person cast for that role. It was actually Rachel McLish, who is a female bodybuilder. And you can actually see her acting in stuff like Ace's Iron Eagle 3. And I thought she was pretty awful in that. So I'm honestly glad that Jenette Goldstein got that role because I don't think that that performance would be as good if it was Rachel McLish. I really don't. Mark Rolston is Drake. The Vasquez and Drake just had some really good chemistry, and in large part it's because of what Mark Rolston and Jenette Goldstein were able to bring to the screen with their characters and the different moments between the two, and the rest of the Spunkmeyer played by Daniel Cash, Crow by Tip Tippin, Rizabowski, played by Trevor Steedman, Dietrich by Cynthia Dale Scott, Farrow, Colette Hiller, all of them. They still did some really solid, really good work. Despite the fact that their Marines didn't have as much screen time or as many memorable moments, they still were able to leave an impact despite their small amount of screen time. And of course, you got Paul Reiser, who plays a great weasel, great Weasley scumbag in this. A guy who you love to hate. You want to see him get killed by an alien by the end of the movie. Apparently, he did such a good job playing this character that even his own girlfriend at the time hated him, and his own mother, once his character got killed by the alien, was like, "Good." So that's a sign of really nailing the character when that's the kind of reaction that you get from people who see the character in action. And of course, you've got other technical elements of the film that are terrific and absolutely tremendous. The cinematography by Adrian Biddle, the editing by Ray Lovejoy. Now, the editing by Ray Lovejoy is really impressive in retrospect because Cameron hated the initial final cut and he almost fired Lovejoy. And Lovejoy, sensing that there was a lot of this tension, decided to spend all of his extra time and re-edit the finale. And that got him to get Cameron's trust and respect, and he was able to stay on the film as the editor, and it led to him getting an Academy Award nomination for his editing in the film, and rightfully so, especially when it comes to the climactic sequence, which that was the scene and that was the series of scenes that he spent all of his extra time on to make sure that he got it right. And I also want to reference the production design by Peter Lamont because it's able to do something that's similar to what Ron Cobb did in terms of the conceptual designs of like the alien nest and some of those other things, but also able to make it his own when it comes to the designs of the Solico and the interiors of it and the other aspects of the movie production design wise. So it doesn't just feel like he's just copying Ron Cobb's work. He's still making it his own. And the score by James Horner is just absolutely spectacular. It's definitely one of Horner's best. And what's interesting is that Horner himself didn't have barely any time to do the score for this. He had next to no time to do it. And Cameron was initially displeased with things, and so he actually was also heavily involved in terms of like re-editing the score to match what he wanted for the film. And because of this tight time crunch, a lot of this score is just reused scores and elements from other scores that Horner did previously. And it's something that became a hallmark of Horner's career, that he would take these other cues that he's already done in these other films of his and then just retool them and retune them and use them for future film projects. But in the case of Aliens, yes, there are familiar cues, but they still fit well. And he also takes some elements and some cues of Jerry Goldsmith's score from Alien and inserts them in seamlessly, and then creates one of the most thrilling and pulse pounding and just adrenaline inducing scores of all time in Bishop's Countdown. So, yeah, I can't sing enough praises when it comes to Horner's score in this, and I just feel the sound design is yet again just really top notch, really grade A stuff, just like the first film, and the practical effects by Al Gillis and Tom Woodruff Jr. and Stan Winston, the Alien Queen, is still just as awesome and jaw dropping today as it must have been back in 1986 when people saw the Queen for the first time in theaters. And even the aliens themselves still look really good, even though it's a lot. There's more of them, and they have a little bit of a different design that's a little more simpler than the complex design from the first movie, but it still works very well. The face huggers look very real. The moments you see the chest bursters are also sequences that definitely feature a lot of moments that are very visceral and very raw and don't really come across as just very rubbery and fake looking. It's a film that I easily could watch over and over again and honestly not get tired of it. Whether it's the theatrical cut or the special edition, and it 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 will continue to stand the test of time as being one of the premier and one of the best films of its genre, and definitely a prime example of how to make a sequel the right way. A sequel that is a homage and a tribute in a lot of ways to the film that came before it, but is also able to stand on its own and be equally as effective of a standalone ride and experience as its predecessor. Until next time, I'll see you later. And as always, Thanks for watching. See ya.